series. Today, we're going to be covering the three AIs in agriculture, what you need to know in 2025. Make sure I click the right thing. Here we go. So, a little housekeeping before we go. If you'd like to ask questions during the presentation, feel free to post them in the chat. We're going to have Q&A time towards the end when we get all three of our speakers doing a little bit of panel style, interacting with you guys. It's going to be great. Feel free to share your personal experience in the chat around this content. I'm sure we can all relate, or some of us can relate to lots of these topics. And then AFA is going to be sharing out the recording today, and it's also going to be posted on our YouTube. So you can share with your team and your friends. We want to call out first that you should save the date for our next webinar on June 18th at noon. We're going to be covering crucial conversations. You don't have to have read the book, of course, but feel free to before the time. It's going to be a great time. We're super excited for this conversation. And then let's get social with AFA. Look us up all over the place. And then I also want to call out our two podcasts. If you like the kind of information you're getting here on our webinars, our podcasts have some great ones as well. We have our Magnetic Ag Ears Edition podcast. Also subscribe to the twice weekly newsletter. And then if you're really looking for some professional development, leadership tips, all awesome things industry, go to our Cultivating Leaders podcast. And with that, I think we're going to get started off today. I'm going to introduce first Dr. Denise Hurd, the Vice President of Research at the U.S. Poultry and Egg Association. She's a board-certified veterinarian. Dr. Hurd holds multiple degrees from the University of Georgia, including her DVM and a Master of Avian Medicine, as well as executive leadership training from Harvard and Washington University. She brings extensive experience from her time as senior coordinator for the USDA's National Poultry Improvement Plan, and now leads a national research portfolio supporting innovation across the poultry and egg industries. Under her leadership, over $34 million has been invested in research projects spanning more than 50 institutions. Denise, the floor is yours.
All right. Good morning. Can you hear me okay? Excellent. Very good. So to start, thank you, Braden, for the introduction. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to chat with everyone today. As Braden said, my background is as a practicing poultry veterinarian, and I oversee a poultry research program where we fund research studies to address any poultry health or production concerns in the poultry industry. I have been involved with the most recent outbreaks of highly pathogenic avian influenza in 2014-2015, which was when I was with the USDA Veterinary Services, and also with the current outbreak, which began in 2022, since I've been with US Poultry. And today I will provide a basic overview of the current U.S. avian influenza situation, how it affects us, and what is needed to contain the disease. Next slide. All right, so avian influenza is often referred to as bird flu. It's a contagious viral disease of domestic and wild birds. Some of the symptoms for poultry would be quite similar to those respiratory symptoms that you guys may have whenever you get the flu. However, a very detrimental type of avian influenza, which we call highly pathogenic avian influenza, is a major threat to not only the poultry industry, but also animal health, trade and trade negotiations with our trading partners in other countries, and the economy worldwide. Highly pathogenic avian influenza is present in wild birds and is causing outbreaks in our U.S. commercial and backyard industries, and most recently also in dairy cattle. Humans and other mammals are also susceptible to this virus. Next slide. So I'm sure most of you have heard of bird flu in the media a lot lately. So let's review what's currently happening in the United States. Next slide. All right, one highlight regarding highly pathogenic avian influenza in commercial poultry is that there is absolutely no way to treat this disease. This is a fatal disease, and upon confirmation of a positive flock, the only thing that you can do is you have to go in very rapidly, typically within 24 to 48 hours, and you will need to humanely euthanize the remaining birds that have not already died of HPAI. I have some figures here that I wanted to share with you guys. This was updated on Monday. It could be very different today as this is an ongoing outbreak. But as of Monday, 168 million birds have been infected with highly pathogenic avian influenza since February of 2022. 1,683 flocks total. 780 of those are commercial poultry, and 903 of those are actually backyard flocks. And backyard flocks could be a person that has two or three birds in their backyard that they raise as pets, up to several thousand birds, which in the United States, because of the size of our industry, could still be considered backyard poultry. All states have been affected with HPAI, including Puerto Rico as well. So as you can see, no state has been spared, and this is a global issue. In the chart over here to the side, I just wanted to highlight the most affected states with HPAI. And as you can see, they're in that darker green color, which would be Minnesota, South Dakota, and California. Next slide. And then last year, the never before unthinkable happened in March of 2024. For the first time ever, not only in the United States, but in the world, bird flu was confirmed in dairy cattle. No one saw this coming, and everyone, including the ag industries, the federal government, state officials, we were all scrambling to try and respond to this disease. You know, as they say, always be prepared for the unknown, right? Well, this was definitely the unknown. This disease presented very differently than it does in poultry. In dairy cattle, it's not deadly, it's not a fatal disease. One of the first signs that you may notice is a decrease in milk production, along with decreased appetite and thickening or discoloration of the milk. And only a small percentage of the herd actually becomes infected with the disease. And with quarantine and some supportive care, the cattle may be rehabilitated. An interesting note, which has been noticed in the dairy herds, is that cats have also been infected on most of the dairies that have become positive. Next slide. So, what does this mean for us? What are the impacts of this devastating disease? Next slide. First, and most importantly, there is a public health component that everyone should be aware of. The virus can spread from wild birds, poultry, cattle, and other species. But it can also be spread from those infected poultry and cattle to humans. This can happen by coming into contact with infected animals, by not washing your hands or not having the appropriate protective equipment if you're working on a flock or with a flock or a herd that's positive. Also, coming in contact with contaminated surfaces or aerosolized virus as well. There have been 70 cases that have occurred during this most recent outbreak. 41 of those have been associated with contact with dairy cattle, 24 with poultry, and 5 are either something else or they are unknown. Next slide. Okay. In addition to the public health components, the agriculture industries and federal government have been spending billions of dollars trying to control and eradicate this disease. Because food animals have either died or had to be depopulated because of highly pathogenic avian influenza, there is less supply of certain food products, which therefore leads to higher prices of the products that we still have available. And significantly, the livelihoods of the invaluable farmers that raise poultry to provide a high quality protein source for the American public, consisting of eggs, chicken, turkey, duck, and many other poultry and egg products, have been devastated. Um, Next slide. Now, the current outbreak has entered into its fourth year, which is really unheard of in the history in the United States. So, what do we do next, or what can we do next, is the next question. Next slide. Well, what we need to do is we desperately need to eradicate this disease, not only from our poultry industry, but also from the dairy cattle as well. And I've listed here just a few of the methods that can be employed in trying to do this. The first and most important method is increased, enhanced, and effective biosecurity. We have to stop the virus from entering into our poultry houses. Whether the virus is being walked into the house on people, or if it's going through the air, or if it's a house on the equipment or insects or rodents, however it may be getting into the house, we have to figure out how to stop the virus entering. Also, we must quickly respond to positive cases so that the virus does not have time to spread to neighbors and become airborne. Another very important focus is research. We need to research this disease. How is this disease mutating so quickly? Why is it now infecting dairy cattle when it never has before? These are the types of questions that we need answers to, and we have to have research in order to figure out those answers. Also, communication across species. This is not just a poultry issue. This involves multiple species, including swine and other mammals as well. Sharing information and the best practices are essential. Ensuring that consumers are up to date on what is happening and following recommendations from federal and state health officials is going to keep everyone healthy. And last but not least, reviewing management and production practices in the industry is a method that all poultry veterinarians, dairy veterinarians, and others must do in order to find new and innovative ways to stop this disease. Next slide. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. I hope that this has been valuable and has shed some light on the current avian influenza outbreak in the United States. And I'd just like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Denise. And if anyone has any questions about avian influenza in the chat, we're going to have some time at the end for all of our panelists to discuss things. And I'm sure you all have lots of questions about your egg prices. So get those in the chat. All right. And with that, we're going to pass it over to Sarah Thomas. Sarah is a lifelong dairy enthusiast from Central North Carolina whose ag journey began at age 5 in the show ring. She's a proud alum of Virginia Tech and the Ohio State University. See, I didn't forget the V, I got you. Sarah holds degrees in dairy science and ag communications. Today, she serves as a product support analyst at Select Sires Incorporated, helping producers leverage genetic tools through the Select Mating Service. Outside the office, she gives back as an assistant coach for the Ohio State dairy judging team and an advisor to the Ohio Junior Holstein Association. Sarah, it is all yours.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for having me today. And yes, Chelsea got it. I'm also an alum of AFA. I got to be on student advisory team in 2020, and you know what a year that turned out to be. So yeah, let's get started. I think I may be talking about I'm not sure the entire history of avian influenza, but I'll tell you right now that artificial insemination is definitely not new to the realm of agriculture, but we'll talk more about it today. We can go ahead and advance to the next slide. So yeah, I mean, if you haven't been exposed to artificial insemination, this is kind of it in a nutshell. These are some really good graphics that Select Sires, which so I work for, of course, has put together over the years. And if you're not familiar with it, you're essentially using a rod to go through really the folds of the cervix to deposit the semen into the uterus or the uterine body, and that's how we create really good cows. But we can go ahead and advance to the next slide. So here we go. Some of my slides may have not sent the way that I originally had them, but that's totally okay. My fault. But yeah, like I said, artificial insemination, not new at all. We might even say that it's one of the best technologies that has ever happened for agriculture. So we're going on 87 years now of artificial insemination being in the United States. We had a really cool a guy named Enos J. Perry bring it over from Denmark back in 1938. He brought it over to New Jersey, which is where we had our first calf born from artificial insemination in 1939, as you can see in that, really high quality picture, of course. And then below that, you can see that we had first calf born from frozen thawed semen born in 1953 named Frosty, which, is kind of funny when you think about it because frozen frosty anyway. I didn't get that for many years growing up, and because it was always something you knew growing up as a kid, for me anyway. And so to make that connection later on was kind of funny. But we'll talk in just a bit just why that frozen component is so important to artificial insemination. And then in our top right corner, we have fresh semen being delivered via airplane and parachute because there was a period of time where we did not have frozen semen and it had to be delivered fresh because those sperm needed to be alive and be able to be viable to enter the cow to create these genetically superior offspring. So, and then in that last bottom right picture, we have you can see those really pretty old glass ampules that we used to use and then store semen in, and which is what the guy in the above picture is trying to catch from the parachute. But we have since transitioned to a French straw, which basically, if you've seen one of those coffee stirrers before, that's exactly what they look like, honestly. It just the price, the value of what's in them is a lot higher. So yeah, we can go ahead and advance to the next slide. And so why does all of this matter? Okay, we've talked about artificial insemination is not new whatsoever, but I want to hit on three big things here. So why is artificial insemination so important? So you have safety, genetics, and biosecurity. And safety, I put that picture in there. It's not a great high quality picture by any means, but you get to see the size and scale of a regular human being versus a bull. And so that's a Rager Red. He was a really big deal for Select Sires. Really great guy, one might even say. But yeah, you can see how big he is. So safety. A lot of times, especially dairy bulls, are known for their aggressiveness. And then so keeping people safe is a big thing. If we could kind of eliminate that part of needing the bull to be on farm, is a huge deal, right? And we're putting what we need in a little French straw like we saw on the previous slide. Genetics. I mean, you don't have to be a top tier dairy judger. If you want to be, let me know. We can talk about it. Not that I'm top tier, but we can certainly talk about dairy judging. But anyway, genetics. Yeah, you see that top middle picture versus the bottom one. Those are big deal, right? And I want to point out, yeah, I'm talking about dairy cow, and what you see behind me are dairy bulls that have really put Select Sires on the map. But artificial insemination has changed the realm of so many species, even aquaculture, which who would have thought? Not me by any means. So yeah, the ability for us to have genetically superior animals and being able to create those without needing to physically have the bull there on the farm is a really neat idea. And then biosecurity. What is that picture? It's sperm under the microscope. And why does it matter? Because part of our process, being a bull stud, is being able to not only offer the semen itself, but high quality semen too. So we look at the shape of what the sperm look like. Are they good enough to pass the test? Because they really do pass tests, not only visually, but health tests as well. Believe it or not, venereal diseases can also be a big problem when you're talking about live bulls on farms. So that's another key component that we can cut out. So it's a big deal. And these are some of the three key points that really make AI worth the while. And we can go to the next slide. So a couple different things going on here. On the right side of the screen, it's a semen tank containing liquid nitrogen. And if you know anything about liquid nitrogen, you know that it is so cold that if you touch it, it'll burn you. So it's one of those deals, about negative 320 degrees Fahrenheit. So yeah, it's pretty cold. So how does semen stay in there? So essentially when the sperm is put into the straw, it's combined with a I can not remember the word right now, extender, that's the word I'm looking for, to basically prolong the shelf life, right? And then we put it in that liquid nitrogen and it can stay forever, really. You have some folks out here in ag that are kind of, some people collect old antique paintings. Some folks may collect old bull semen, and that's okay too. It's not necessarily genetically superior 60 years later, but it is something that some people like to do. But the big point here is that when we started freezing semen in the 50s, that was a huge deal because I could then, get good quality semen from a bull that I really want out in Wisconsin all the way to New York, and there not be an issue. And now this is a global thing, and we ship semen all over the world. So, and that way we can create more genetically superior animals, whether that's beef, dairy, fish, on and on, in a faster, more efficient way. And then the last thing I want to touch on this slide is, yeah, you see these are really like two sire summaries, and you'll notice the one on the left is, of course, quite a bit older, and that arrow is pointing to the information that we have about the bull. It's not very much. Yeah, you have his pedigree and maybe some of what his ancestors have done, but that's about all you're going to get. Whereas now, you said in this middle photo that we have of one of Select Sire's bulls, he's one of my favorite. His name is Hulu, and you see really a glimpse of the information we have now. And all those numbers are super important. All those indexes have a rhyme, reason behind them, and different producers look at different traits there to be able to know what they want on their farm. But another key component of this is we instead of we have this one live bull, and the bull on the left, he was born in 1942, so he wasn't during that time of frozen semen yet. So we would just have really the one ejaculate, and that's it. Whereas for Hulu, we can take the one ejaculate and take that into hundreds of units that we can then disperse. So that then we see creates the genetic superiority even faster. And then just to put it into perspective, I mean, we'll probably, I think Select Sires may put out, maybe 25 million units of semen this year. And that's just us. So maybe that just puts a little bit of a glimpse of artificial insemination into our lives. And we can go ahead and go to the next slide. I know I'm a yapper, so I'll try to, stick to my time here. But what's next? So really the interesting thing about artificial insemination or the realm of artificial insemination is in the past few years, we haven't necessarily seen a lot of evolution because we're in the process of fine tuning. And these are just a couple of things that are being fine tuned. So on the left, you'll see a flow cytometer for sex semen. And why would we even use sex semen? Well, for a long time, we wanted just the X chromosomes in semen so that we could, create heifers faster and have a better chance of getting heifers and females on the farm. So what does a flow cytometer do? Basically, it has the semen kind of drip through, and then it has a laser that points the X chromosomes one way and the Y's another way. But now we're even seeing that we could even have some use for bull, or really creating sex semen more to create a bull calf. So it depends on the producer's needs and wants, and for the market that they're in. So it's really nice to be able to offer these kinds of options. And beef on dairy, if you're not familiar with it yet, you will be, because beef on dairy is probably more of a third of the market now within artificial insemination. And why does it matter? I mean, in a nutshell, if we can take the bottom third performing of our herd, for example, on a dairy, and we don't necessarily want that bottom third to pass their genetics on. So what could we do? We could breed them to a beef bull, and that calf is already worth more financially right off the bat, rather than if you have a calf that has full dairy genetics. But when they have that beef component added into them, they can bring a little more at the market if that's what you're going for. We also have genomics. Genomics isn't new. It's crazy to believe it'll be 20 years old because I remember when I was younger when this was, just starting to come out. So genomics, basically, we could figure out just how good a bull may or a female may be later on down the road, but we can tell it now because we have been able to identify um, genome sequences and all that good jazz. Won't get into a lot, but basically we just have a lot more information sooner instead of having to wait for a longer period of time. And then yeah, what's next? Maybe we find alternative freezing methods for semen in the future, or different ways to create our sex semen without a flow cytometer. We may even look at different kind of sperm bioassays, depending on how much we want to look into fertility, because we should probably all know that dogs and cats have much better fertility than cows by all means. But yeah, this is just kind of one example. I hope I hit the highlights, and I'll be happy to answer any questions y'all may have towards the end. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. I'm sure, yeah, any questions you have about artificial insemination or the dairy industry in general, I'm sure Sarah would love to chat about it here in a little bit. So please kick those into the chat. And that is going to bring up our next panelist, Lauren. So Lauren King supports artificial intelligence, digital outreach, and social media work as part of Morgan Myers, a GNS agency. I think I saw in the chat we have some Morgan Myers employees supporting their coworkers, so that's great to see. Welcome to AFA. Outside of work, he serves on the Michigan State University Ag Bio Research Council and as chair of the American Farm Bureau Technology Advisory Committee. So Lauren, with that, tell us about all the fun AI things that are going to make me feel not very smart.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you might feel better about it by the end of the presentation. And Braden, you can go ahead and jump to the next slide, I think, because this is just an intro. Thank you for that. And before Chelsea says anything, I'm also an AFA alumni. Got to get that out there. See, Chelsea, you don't have to chase me down later. Took care of it. But when I'm talking about AI, I'm talking about artificial intelligence. The third of our series, I would definitely expect me to not keep using the words artificial intelligence because they're long. So just be aware that when I'm saying AI, not talking about insemination or avian influenza. I am talking about that little digital tool that you might have in your pocket. And to start things off, I wanted to go into both an idea that makes AI seem really small and an idea that makes AI seem really big so that we can start to kind of get a grasp on this technology. First off, we'll start with the small. So when you're thinking about AI, you're thinking in terms of a tool that is basically autocorrect on your phone. We've all used autocorrect to some degree. And honestly, the technology that you use when you're going into ChatGPT is not that far off of it. It's called a supercharged autocorrect to some degree. So hopefully that makes it fall into perspective a little bit of a grasp on how it works, recommending words one after another. It's the same thing that any of the tools you see on your screen right now do, just to the nth degree, if you will. So small side of AI, but then on the large side of AI, what people don't really know is that we don't actually know how it works to the fullest degree. So artificial intelligence systems, we have an idea of how the technology is set up, how the equations are established, the algorithms on the back end. But why it's so accurate is a question that still eludes a lot of scientists. You can actually consider it a bit of a black box. So we're even learning how this technology works as we can access it on our phones to this day. Now, I'm going to focus on what we would call, basically chatbots or public-facing artificial intelligence tools, and leave some of the stuff you might not see in public for later discussions. If you have questions, of course, leave them in the chat here. But the major players that we have in artificial intelligence today are, first up, OpenAI. This is ChatGPT. I'm sure you all remember October 2022-ish. When ChatGPT launched, the tool that revolutionized the world, largest adoption or quickest adoption of a app I think the App Store has ever seen. But there are other competitors in the market. And for those who have more experience with artificial intelligence, there may be names that you're looking for that you're not seeing here. And I'll get to why those aren't included in a minute. But OpenAI is number one. They are also the most precarious because unlike a lot of other countries, they don't really have companies, they don't have a really established funding base. And so they have the potential of being bought out or being overrun by an organization like Microsoft. If anybody uses the Microsoft suite, you've probably heard about Copilot to some degree. Microsoft is taking the lead when it comes to business and enterprise focused solutions. Their Copilot tool is basically certified for major data processing that a lot of other tools can't necessarily match, which is a huge benefit when you're dealing with private information. It's also integrated across their suite, the advantage of being a almost $1 trillion company. Now, Google's an interesting one because Google actually invented a lot of the technology behind artificial intelligence as we kind of experience it in our everyday lives. The first time I heard the term large language model, which you may have heard tossed around quite a bit, was in 2013. It's because Google published a study that explained how those worked. Now, back then, nobody kind of knew what to do with it, so it just kind of sat on the side. Then some startups like OpenAI figured out that you could put it into a chatbot, for lack of a better term, and all of a sudden this really neat but kind of hard to use idea became accessible for all of us. So Google's one to watch because they basically know how this technology works better than anybody else. They also have their own suite of apps that they're tying in Gemini to in every way possible. I also have Meta on this list because Meta is doing a very different approach to AI. They're open sourcing it, which means that you or I or anybody else can theoretically download it, make the changes ourselves, and then almost build a custom AI of our own if we're good enough at coding, which I am not. Last one on the list, DeepSeek/Chinese AI competitors. These are of note because they're able to build tools that can compete with ChatGPT and others at like 1,000th or 1 millionth the price, meaning that they're basically making the technology a lot more commercial and accessible, but they're probably going to get banned in most cases in the US. Just something to be aware of. Braden, if you could jump to the next slide for me, please. Now, how does this apply to agriculture, food, and just our general lives? You can see over there on the left, I've got my own doll that my team helped create for me. That's obviously a trend that's taken over your social media feeds. You may be used to it, but just in general, we're seeing most people get used to creating videos and photos, the adoption of deep research tools to help identify stuff on the internet that might be hard to find, helping build out research studies and things like that. We're seeing lawsuits engaged on IP, who actually owns it when you create a picture from ChatGPT, if it was trained on somebody else's data. The interest of small language models, which we will touch on a little bit more later, and then agents or automations, basically letting these tools operate something else in your life. Agriculture is approaching things a little bit differently. You heard Sarah talk about genetics quite a bit. There is interest and application of AI to help research genetics and help potentially project the outcomes of plant or animal-based crossovers. We're also seeing it in farm reporting, an easy one, which is answering agronomic questions. Pretty useful to be able to get a relatively in-depth answer on, sending in a photo of specifically soybean cyst nematode damage on soybeans, or maybe something else that's a little bit harder to get at when you're out in the field in the middle of nowhere, as long as you have internet service. And then synthesizing the data that your farm has. Wanted to touch on food as well because we're really seeing the food side of the industry adopt these technologies. We actually had a discussion right before this call about putting in the ingredients you have in your fridge and getting a recipe out of it, which is a very basic use case, but a lot of companies are jumping on that. Even if you look at like an Uber Eats or elsewhere, what can I do? How can I get fries that meet this need? And we're also seeing this interest in finding things based off of feel. You might have seen a Google commercial where they asked Gemini to help them find an Italian restaurant that has like a shady view and a postmodern vibe that can seat a bunch of people. So those are the kinds of things that are very hard for a regular Google search to answer or a Yelp, but AI can kind of specialize in because it's trained on the entire internet. So it kind of has an idea of what feels like what. Then ordering without ordering. This is just basically letting AI help choose your food for you and saying, hey, go through my Uber Eats account and choose X, X, and X without you having to go anywhere, without you having to log in, just making it as easy as possible to get access to the food that you want. And live monitoring, which is a little bit on the back end, but helping you use your smartwatch or your smart ring to recommend food choices based on how you're feeling at that point. Great, you can go ahead and jump to the next one. Why does this matter for us, especially when it comes to agriculture and food? Biggest reason I can think of is you're going to use artificial intelligence, even if you don't know it, even if you're not used to it, even if it's not called that in the app that you're interacting with. So when you're using artificial intelligence, You have to be aware of how these technologies work because they are different than a Google search. They are different than Excel. They are different than everything else that you're used to. And building a skill set to operate effectively in them can help potentially supercharge your workflows. It can help you do things you might not have been able to on your own before. Or it can go horribly wrong if you're not used to the technology and you kind of get something that doesn't feel accurate. So it's just something to be wary of. Artificial intelligence is a two-edged sword. You can you can use it well, or you can be like the lawyers in Texas whose case was thrown out because it made up case law that did not exist and they did not double check it. And we'll get into a few examples of how not to do that here at the end. Next slide for me, please. But what's next? I also made the joke earlier that this presentation will be out of date by the time I'm done, and it probably already is. But a few things that you can keep an eye on. If you're just a general consumer, integrating your agents into all your other apps and services. Hey Siri, help me plan a flight out to this location and recommend me a playlist on Apple Music I can listen to. That's the exact length of my flight. Those are the kinds of things you're going to be able to do eventually because all your technology will talk to each other. Also, just turned on Siri myself on my phone. We're also starting to see these technologies slow down. You might have noticed the newest ChatGPT models aren't nearly as good at doing new things as maybe the first few times that they made an update. That just means that we're learning the limits of the technology as it is now. We may see some sea changes in the future, but this is a good time to start to understand how the technologies work because you're probably not going to get blindsided for the next few months at least with anything absolutely crazy. That said, I've been wrong before. And then just robotics, tying in digital systems to physical systems. In agriculture, you can start to look out for situations where your different data types can talk to each other. In the past, there's been issues maybe with mapping, where it's encoded one way and it doesn't communicate the other way with your system. Artificial intelligence is a great way to start getting around some of those gaps. We're also likely going to see tools that are trained on agriculture-specific data that can help decrease concerns around accuracy, increase speed, and make it more context sensitive for your farm. And my favorite is as these artificial intelligence is incorporated into voice assistants, just expect farmer use to skyrocket because farms, at least like my grandfather and my dad, the voice assistant is the way to go for them. So we're going to see some real adoption increases once Siri and Google Assistant are fully powered by artificial intelligence. On the food side, consumers are really interested in using artificial intelligence related to food. And so that is moving very, very quickly. Smart tech, this is your rings, your watches, those are going to keep getting better. And then what I've been calling parallel personalization. Once you have an AI assistant on your phone that can keep an eye on you, oh, there's my timer. I talked too long already. That can keep an eye on you. It's going to help make recommendations and make you a little bit better at making the right food choices or help you align with your schedule. Imagine like planning out your family meal plan automatically, just knowing what your calendar is. Then, Braden, we can go to my next slide, my last one. See, not that far off. These are 4 rules that you can use when you're working with artificial intelligence. They're dead simple and they hopefully can help drive adoption for you. First off, learn how it works. Learn how the technology is on the back end. These systems are pretty much the same, so once you start trying something new, if you've really got the fundamentals down, it should be pretty easy to grasp. The best research right now says it takes about 10 hours of experimenting with artificial intelligence before it really truly is something that you've got a handle on. So just play around, try something weird. Start with your struggles. What is challenging you in your work? What's boring? What's repetitive? What do you think you can automate? That's a great way to start putting your toe in the water without necessarily having to learn everything at once. I was able to automate some receipt processing for me, which was fantastic and underrated, but there are other options that you can pursue as well. Never trust the first draft of what comes out of the tool. This includes facts, this includes writing. Everything that comes out of AI should be considered very, very carefully. That said, it helps conquer blank page syndrome. So if you can't come up with any ideas, put in a prompt. It can help you probably conquer that pretty easily. And then the last thought here is build a new box. If you're having a hard time grasping the power of artificial intelligence, ask it yourself. I'm not very good at coding, but I was able to use AI to help me write some code to do something pretty cool for my dad's farm with a live data display. I couldn't have done that on my own, and just by asking the tool to help me craft, I had a bigger picture of how artificial intelligence works. I know that was a lot, so thanks for bearing with me. Thanks, Braden, for letting me go over time and not cutting my mic, but I will be happy to answer any questions going forward. I know this is a big one.
All right. Thank you, Lauren. We do All right. First of all, thank you to the three of our panelists. They did an awesome job. I learned a lot. I hope everyone else did too. And with that, we're going to move into some questions. So, Denise, I think the first question on everybody's mind with avian flu information is going to be how exactly, can you go into some more detail about how it really does affect our egg prices and prices at the grocery store?
Yeah. I kind of figured that was going to be one of the questions that I got because the price of eggs are significantly higher than they were, say, a year ago. And it's interesting because HPAI has a lot to do with the price of eggs right now. But what a lot of people don't understand is that you have your chickens that you have for meat production, you make your grilled chicken breast and so and then you have layer hens, layer chickens that produce the eggs. And it actually takes over 20 weeks to grow a layer hen. So they don't start producing eggs until they are like 5 months old. And so when you have 30 million layers that have either died or been depopulated because of HPAI, you just can't hatch more layer chicks and they start producing eggs. It's going to take 5 months. It's a 5 month delay before they start to lay eggs. And when they start to lay eggs, they're not laying an egg every day. So, they hit puberty and it's kind of a curve. They start laying eggs, they reach the height. And as they get older, that egg production starts going back down again. And so the layer industry has lost a huge percentage of the layers that they have in the field and they have to be replaced in order to get the supply back up to meet the demand. And it's just not happening right now because we're still losing a lot of layer chickens to the disease. I hope that explains it a little bit better.
Awesome. All right, Sarah, I've got one for you. So, what do you think the biggest misconception about artificial insemination in livestock is?
Yeah, that it harms the animal or that it's doing more harm than good. Uh, but I mean, really, you go back to that safety concept. I mean, bulls can hurt people. I have personally known people that have been dairymen their entire lives, and one wrong move or glance or something with a bull, and they've died. Like not to be just so forward to the point, but it is how it's happened. And then keeping other people safe, keeping your cows safe. I mean, when you think about how things really happen in nature, bulls do not weigh, like a piece of paper. They're pretty heavy, right? And then again, we have the keeping everything else clean too, because venereal diseases can happen between bulls to cows, and I think something that I wanted to hit on too that I might have failed to mention earlier is really like the grand scheme of artificial insemination, no matter what the species is, that the goal now in our world, because we have such a growing population with less resources, is through artificial insemination and other genetic tools alike, we're able to create more genetically superior animals. And what does that mean? They're more efficient and they're more sustainable, which is what a lot of our consumers care about. So I hope that answered the question.
Awesome, I think so. Lauren, here's one for you.
Fire
So,
away.
they're asking for any good resources that can help explain how to use AI tools like ChatGPT, etc. For
Mhm.
example, they're not sure what functions an AI can and cannot do, or if certain AI programs handle certain tasks better than others.
Hmm. It's a good question. And honestly, there's not necessarily a one size fits all answer. So sorry about that in advance. But because AI is so ubiquitous, it can apply to largely any situation where there's any kind of data at all. It's not possible to figure out all the use cases. That said, I would recommend starting with the fundamentals of understanding how the technology works. There's a fun fact from a few months ago. You used to be able to ask AI how many R's are in the word strawberry, and odds were you'd get something completely wrong. And the reason for that is because at that point, the technology didn't actually have the ability to, quote, read, if you will. It was more like turning the word strawberry into a mathematical equation. And so it was irrelevant. There were no R's being interpreted by it. You can't prepare for a situation like that without understanding the fundamentals of how the technology works. But if you want to actually get used to it and figure out how the functions apply to your career or what AI tools are better, the common recommendation is to have a few different options and try them all roughly at the same time. So you could go with ChatGPT and Claude. That's another popular one for writing tasks, and compare the output. Make sure it aligns with what you're interested in. Going back to that 10-hour recommendation of 10 hours of testing, I would come up with 2 or 3 ideas that you want to explore with AI, and then just create different prompts and run through the tools yourself and see if you like what you're getting back. Now, a note on this is it's not going to be very good at certain things. Like if I was to take some of Sarah's questions around artificial insemination, odds are a general purpose tool like ChatGPT is not going to be nearly as accurate as an expert. But the nice part is that we are experts in our careers, and so we can judge those questions fairly and see if the responses we're getting are applicable or not. The hack though, and Mark, for your question, this is the best hack that I've come up with is if you don't like what you're getting from an AI tool, just ask AI what other tools can do what you're looking for, and it'll search the internet and provide you an example, which is much, much quicker than trying to go for Google.
Awesome. All right, Denise, here's another one for you.
Okay.
What steps are being taken to identify the strand of avian influenza in dairy cattle? It's kind of a three-parter here. What signs and symptoms are they showing? And then what are we seeing as far as impact on milk and milk production, if you can speak to that?
Those are some really great questions. So, what steps are being taken to identify the different strains of avian influenza in dairy cattle? We have passive and active surveillance plans right now going on. So, there is a federal program so that dairies can voluntarily participate in it, where they're taking samples, they're taking bulk samples, they're taking individual samples, and so they're constantly monitoring the dairy industry for avian influenza. That same goes for the poultry industry as well. And all of the samples that are taken are typed and genotyped, so we know what those strains are. What signs and symptoms? Again, for dairy cattle, it's not as severe. So one of the first signs that you might see is that they will go off feed. So you'll see a decreased appetite in the dairies, and then also you'll see a reduction in milk production. There have been just very, very, very few cases of actual respiratory disease that you've seen in some dairy cattle, and typically they have a secondary ailment or disease or some sort of immunocompromise that would lead to seeing those respiratory signs. But those are typically what you would see, maybe a discoloration or thickening of the milk. But again, that's usually 10% of the herd or less, and they can be rehabilitated with supportive care and quarantine from the others. That is an option for them. The impact isn't as bad on milk production. Because again, those cows can come back into production at some point. Also, the milk that they have been produced can be pasteurized and used elsewhere. And then again, they go back into production. So we haven't really seen any significant changes in like the price of milk compared to like the price of eggs, and hopefully that won't be the case.
Yeah. All right, Sarah, you talked about beef and dairy, the beef combined with dairy genetics in your presentation. So is that something that Select Sires has been working on as a direct result of the market prices and customers wanting more beef genetics in their cattle? Or is it something that Select Sires saw coming and wanted to create another advantage for its customers?
Yeah, really good question. And I'm gonna give you it's a little bit of both. I mean, really what happened is that we ended up with we got really good at creating females. And so we had a flooded heifer market for a good while. And it's one of those ebb and flow type situations. So, some folks saw the opportunity of, well, we don't really want these genetics to continue to go on. I talked about earlier, like that bottom third of your herd is what a lot of folks will do, as far as breeding that bottom third to beef semen. And so, you're creating, instead of an animal that could, potentially go on and you don't not do so great in the dairy side of things, but instead you could create an animal that's going to go into the beef market. So really, people started doing it, and Select Sires, along with a lot of other folks too, saw the opportunity and was like, hey, if you're going to do it, let's throw in some more technicalities to it. What exactly are we going to focus on? And there's other initiatives too that make it a point to sometimes you'll have this calf born, but there's not always a guarantee of a market for it to go. And that's one of the programs that's available, promises and holds up that idea of, as long as this beef on dairy calf is born, it and everything goes well, like it's going to have a place to go within the market, which is reassuring, just because of how crazy the markets can be, and being a farmer in general. So I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
All right, Denise, I know you have a hard stop, so I'm going to get this question in, and then you are free to go on with your day. So thank you very much for your time. Will we feel the loss of eggs in the Midwest from the recent Illinois truck fire last Friday, carrying the 24,000 pounds of eggs? Essentially, how does that affect the egg shortage already from avian influenza?
Yeah, it's not enough that we have HPAI. Now we have eggs being burned up on the truck. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. And with that amount of eggs, 24,000 pounds, we're going to feel that effect because we're already at a deficit. So any significant amount of eggs that we're losing, we're going to feel the effect of it, especially going into Easter, where the demand for eggs is going to be extremely higher. This is the big season for eggs right now. Like Thanksgiving is for turkey, Easter is for eggs. And so everyone's going to be trying to stock up on those eggs. And unfortunately, we're going to feel, this as well, along with avian influenza and any other transmissible poultry diseases that we have going on out there.
Awesome. Well, Denise, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciated you joining us.
Thank you.
All right, Lauren, I've seen some conversation in the chat around this next question, so let's get to it. So are search engines dialing back the quality of their responses to queries with the intent of driving more people to AI?
It's a good question, because I think we all can see it in action, of course. But the answer from what I've seen is a little bit more complex than yes or no. Yes, in many cases, Google and others are trying to drive people to using AI summaries rather than actually visiting websites. There's a lot of small businesses that are showing that their website traffic is dropping because people don't even click through anymore. They just read the summary. And then the summaries can often be wrong because they're pulling from so many different sources at once. However, one consideration that has to be kept in mind with some of these tools that are tied into the internet, so we'll take Google and then Microsoft if you're considering Bing as a competitor, that their main income is from advertising. And so they're not really getting a lot of income when you're shown a Gemini result because there's not truly ads built into it yet. They've been trying to figure that out. So there isn't going to be an incentive to drive somebody away from a traditional Google search yet, because they're going to lose money every time they do that, especially with how expensive it is to operate artificial intelligence through a data center, through water access, which I saw we had a question about that. But what I've seen, it takes about 25 times as much energy to complete a chat GPT, in this case, search versus a Google search. So there are a lot of considerations from a business side that make me think that they're not truly trying to decrease the accuracy of Google search results yet, if that makes sense. But testing the waters to see how consumers like it.
Cool. Yeah, I've noticed that too, Lauren, when I search something and I get the AI things, and then it's pulling sources from random like things on X from people that have no anything, just
No
random
bearing
things
on
people
it
said
at
on
all.
accounts. Yeah.
My one example is somebody was pulling up a history of dumbbells. So I heard this query recently. He wanted to ask what the history of dumbbells were, when were they created. And this guy was an expert in it. He knew he'd written an article on it. And the story was about some like king dumbbell in the 17th century. And it was like completely unrelated to the topic and not accurate at all. So I would guess, if I was to put it out there, that a lot of this is just testing to see how audiences like to use the tool, and it's less about actually trying to get you to move from a traditional search option yet, or because with the degradation of it, there's just so many factors going into it. You also have to think about the keywords. If you're going to ask, hey, tell me about Italy, there's a lot that goes into Italy. It's a lot harder for a tool to get that for you. So kinks to work out. That probably is more questions than answers, but that's the way I see it.
Yes. All right, Sarah. I hear you have a very interesting role at SelectSide, or something that comes with your role that I've heard it been described as, some would say, Bumble for dairy cattle.
For
You
sure.
want to have some space to talk about that and explain that?
Sure. Yeah. So I actually work in IT, which I had no prior or background training, whatever on. Um, but and really, I mean, when I first saw this job posting, I scrolled right by. I thought it looks like a smart people thing. Okay. And then thankfully I have good people in my life, and they sent it to me and they said, you should apply for this. And I thought, well, maybe that's a sign. I'll go for it. And now here we are. But so what do I do? Select Mating Service is an application. So we install it on folks' computers, and it is essentially like a dating app for cows, but it plays matchmaker. I would say it does a better job than what is offered to us humans. But yeah, so if it's really neat. You upload your cow information about your females. You put in the bulls that you want to work with, and it matches them up. So and it takes so many things into account. So inbreeding, any type of bad trait that you don't want to pass on. And it allows folks to really individualize their experience too. So if they want to focus on, higher fat production in milk, in their cow's milk, they can do that too. So yeah, it's really neat. And it doesn't like let matings happen if like the inbreeding is above a certain percentage. So yeah, that's kind of the dating app for cows in a nutshell.
So, Sarah, to do all that matching, does it use any AI, or are we looking into it starting to use AI to help?
Yeah, I mean, right now it's an intense algorithm that I don't know a whole lot about, right? I just let it do its thing. I can fix the basic issues, but yeah, like we do have a lot of space in our IT department, which is actually that way, and our crew is looking more and more into every day of how we can use AI here. I wouldn't say that there's anything right now that we're really implementing. But definitely lots of talk and chat of what is this going to look like in the future for a bull stud like us.
Well, we are at time now. Thank you so much, Lauren and Sarah, and of course Denise, who had to hop off early because she had a hard stop at 11. But thank you to our panelists that did such an awesome job today. I have learned a lot. I hope you all learned a lot. Be looking at your inboxes for an email from the AFA team thanking you for being here today with access to a recording. Please share that recording with your friends. And of course, sign up for our June 18th webinar. When we start sending things out about that, we're going to be covering a conversation on crucial conversations, the book. So read the book so you can participate, or don't read the book and just come learn if you just want the highlights. And with that, you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for being here.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks.